And again, it goes back to the I'm weird, I'm broken, I'm crazy, because everybody else seems to be able to handle it. And somehow I'm the one who feels more pressure, more struggle. Why is it just me? It's not just you. There are so many of us out there. And one of the joys of my work is bringing some of these women together in community to be able to hear each other's stories and be able to talk with each other and share both the challenges and the wins, because there is somebody else who gets you.
Hello, Embracing Only podcast listeners. We're so excited to have you on here. Olivia and I are so excited to welcome Rachel Radway, who is a certified leadership and executive coach, Mastermind facilitator, and author of Perceptive. Mark your calendars because it's coming out 2025 and you want to get a copy of this. She has more than 25 years of leadership experience across tech startups, not-for-profits, and Fortune 500s. And she's particularly passionate about helping women leaders who are wired a little differently to create the conditions they need to thrive. And Rachel has often felt like an only because of the way she's wired, even though up to 30% of the population are neurodivergent in some way. Her other experiences as an only include being the only woman director on a leadership team of men and the only native English speaker living in a city of 90,000 people in northern Portugal. You have to all go and check out her website because the story runs way deeper on where Rachel has lived in 9 countries and studied 9 languages as well as intercultural communications. She's lived in places where there was no running water and electricity. I would not know what I would do with myself. And she loves learning about other cultures and very different ways of seeing and being in the world. She runs RER coaching, and she loves seeing her clients light up as they learn more about their brains, different wiring, embrace their superpowers, and redesigning aspects of work and life to better align with their values and goals. Rachel, we're so excited to have you on the Embracing Only podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Archita. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Hello, Olivia. I am really excited to be talking with both of you.
So glad. We're going to jump right into this. I'm an engineer and I love numbers. And you mentioned somewhere, I think it was on a LinkedIn post or somewhere, where you said that about 20% of people are affected by high sensory perception. Yet, the understanding of this trait is one either misunderstood, not diagnosed, not understood, especially in high achieving women. So how can women better understand their journey on their path, whether it be neurodivergent or not, and leverage it as a leadership strength, Rachel?
So it's a great question, Archita. I think, first of all, it's actually a little bit more than 20%. There are different numbers floating around out there. There is a site called sensitivityresearch.com that talks about a bell curve, basically. So at the low end, about 30% of the population are not very sensitive at all. At the high end, about 30% of the population are highly sensitive, for example. This is not true of every person who has high sensory perception, but sound tends to be a really common one. So, for example, when there's noise in the environment that I can't control, it plays on my nervous system and gets really frustrating. I hope you guys can't hear the trash and recycling people who are outside right now, because that noise, or when there's somebody using power tools, the landscapers that use the power tools, it drives me nuts. Even like low humming kinds of noises. So when my downstairs neighbors leave the fan on in their bathroom when they're taking a shower, I can hear the fan in my room, and it just is this buzzing sound that I can't control. It doesn't mean I can't take noise at all. I can go to a concert if I psych myself up for it and prepare and make sure that I have an escape route planned out, make sure that I can have some downtime afterwards. But I think of sensitivity in terms of a sound mixing board. So if you picture one of those boards that have all of the channels and you can dial them up or down, basically we all have one of those. And if you think of each channel as being something else that you might be sensitive to, so it could be caffeine or medications or alcohol or cigarette smoke, or some of us are very sensitive to the tags on clothing or seams on clothing. Clothing has to be very comfortable. Other things include emotional sensitivity. So one of the gifts that high sensory people often have is they can read a room. They have deep empathy. and they can understand what other people need to feel more comfortable. There are other gifts, which I can talk about too, but in terms of the sensitivity component of it, there's also energetic sensitivity. So sometimes we can walk into a room and feel the energy. Even online, this can happen. We sense if there's been a conflict before we joined, or if there is tension in the air, or if there's some other kind of energy happening that other people don't necessarily feel the same way. So that's a start. There are a bunch of other superpowers and challenges that tend to come with this trait.
I love that question that you have. Have you always been a little more sensitive versus others? That is totally a trigger question, by the way, for someone who is more sensitive. I shared this because I was just sharing with Rachel and with Olivia before we got on the podcast recording that I've been talking to my therapist. And then this last session, I was like, I think I've diagnosed and I think I am neurodivergent. And she's like, no kidding. You're somewhere there. And I've been talking to you about this for the last whole year. And I'm like, what do you mean? I mentioned this. And you remember that moment where you got really emotional because you didn't want to even hear it. And I was like, that was you telling me that I've got some neurodivergent needs there? And she's like, yes. And it's interesting because when I reflected, when I was 18, I had emotional set. I think I'm not yet been diagnosed. I'm not going to self-diagnose. It's useless. But when I was 18, one of my managers told me this, Archita, you're really sensitive to a certain kind of feedback. And then I kept training myself about how to receive feedback for the last 15, 20 years versus exploring other aspects of how my brain actually works and how it functions, because the workplace kind of channels us and molds us to look at problems a certain way. And those problems don't tend to go inwards. They tend to go more like, these are the things you should fix outside. So, Olivia, I know you have burning questions to ask, but I'm going to throw this out and then I'm going to turn it over to you. So, Rachel, for individuals who maybe have been asked this question, have put it away in like a box to never ever think about it, how can they re-engage with it to start that introspection journey?
So it's really interesting. There's so many different things I want to respond to in what you said, but I'll just take the last one. There are a number of self-assessments that you can take online that are quick and easy and painless that ask you to reflect a little bit on patterns that have been either in your childhood or adulthood or throughout your life that can help you tell whether you're highly sensitive or not. And it's funny that your story about your therapist and wanting more directness from her, because one of the things that is true for a lot of us is we really want, even though we can read between the lines and read a room and get the energy, we really want direct information. And we like logic. Again, there are assessments that you can take online to tell. High sensitivity or high sensory perception isn't a diagnosis. It's not a disorder. There is very few healthcare professionals are actually familiar with that specifically. And we talked a little bit about neurodivergence. There's a whole range. There's this bucket of neurodivergence, and a lot of the symptoms overlap too. There are resources that you can find. And I have a lot of questions that I ask when I'm working with someone if they want to learn more about it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Cream. If you are a corporate girly and you are struggling, you're feeling stuck, maybe you're feeling underpaid, overqualified, you're struggling with your boss, or bigger yet, you're even trying to clearly articulate what it is that you want from your corporate career, I am the coach for you. So if you're ambitious and you've got goals to accomplish and you want to accomplish them quickly, check out my website, oliviacream.com. I would love to help you reach your goals.
Hi, everybody. I'm Archita Fritz, your other host of the Embracing Only podcast. If you're ready to leave corporate or you've changed a couple of corporate jobs and want to start a profitable side brilliance, you've made the decision, but you feel unsure of the next steps, here's how I can help you. I can guide you through a successful transition to entrepreneurship to help turn those ideas into profit. So reach out to me on LinkedIn or visit me on architafritz.com to accelerate your empowered transitions. Now, back to the episode.
Archita's right. I have so many questions, but I think I'm so fascinated, Rachel, with the way the mind works. And Archita knows this about me. I think I use it a ton in my coaching practice as well, but it's more around unlocking potential. And I think Archita and I both, there might be something to this because as you were describing the noises, OMG. Yes. Yes, with the noises. My poor husband, all these years with the random noises. So there's something certainly there. Now, in your podcast, Rachel, with Shelley Doyle, you discuss thriving as a high sensory introvert in a digital world. I certainly resonate with the introvert part of things. I'm starting to get interested and wrap my head around the high sensory part of it. But what strategies have you found most effective for managing that sensory overload in our increasingly connected workspaces, especially now that people are in hybrid environments and it's like the work is now in your house and it doesn't stop. So what strategies can you share with us?
Absolutely. So there are a number of things, and I've included this in my book too. One thing, the work at home part can make things a lot easier for a lot of us who are highly sensitive. So when you are in a workplace that is a shared workspace, there are all kinds of factors that we can't control, right? Not only is there sound, and there could be sound from a lot of different sources, there can be smells. So I remember one job where I was sitting close to the kitchen and people would be microwaving their foods, and there were people from all over the world and there were lots of different foods, and somebody brought in fish one day and I was like, oh God, I can't. It's just a smell that I have a hard time with, and I'm super sensitive to it. So where somebody else may not be bothered at all, it comes full force for me. Then there are things like the artificial lighting, the overhead lighting, especially if you can't get a seat near windows. Sometimes people are so affected by the lighting that they get migraines from it. There are things like air conditioning, which often we can't control ourselves, right? So it's either too cold or too hot, or it's blowing directly on you. Even things like the ergonomics. So how high is your desk and how good is your desk chair? And do you have a foot rest? Things like that. So working at home is an option that just allows those of us who are wired a little bit differently to create conditions for success. And this is something that I love to work with corporations on. There are obviously challenges for working at home when your home is a shared space as well, when you've got kids or pets or spouses, partners who are also in your space. Definitely coming up with agreements with each other for timing. So, for example, if you're both there at the same time and you need to be able to concentrate for a certain chunk of time, maybe you can come up with agreements to block off a certain place. If there's a place with a door that you can close, maybe you can hang a little sign outside the door saying from 1 to 2 p.m., I am off limits. Please keep the noise down. And this is what I'm doing. It's complicated because there's so many different potential scenarios. Both of you have bookshelves with objects that are important to you, and the greenery. We talked about plants before. Creating a space that is calming and that allows you to concentrate can be super helpful. I also have very specific rules about digital contact. I turn my phone off at certain times. I turn my email off when I'm doing things like being on podcasts or in meetings. Anytime that it could disturb me, I turn that off. I have all of my sound notifications turned off on Slack, on email, on texts on my phone. They're off permanently. So those are a few things that I use. There are a lot more, but it depends on specific situations.
I can't tell you how much I'm resonating with what you're saying. And I have to share this funny story. My husband's in the other room. He's probably going to hear this and roll his eyes. But I literally, as you can see, I used to do my Apple Watch and then I switched to a Venus, and the buzzing and dinging from it, disturbance. Okay. The pause is me trying to find the words of how much that bothers me. And then at home, my husband has his own company. And so of course he needs to be responsive to customers. And so on his work phone, it's ding dong, like that kind of noise when he gets a text, because at least the ringer is off, but the notification is still there. Rachel, You would laugh at me. Every time it happens, I'm like,
Really
I think
is.
this is fascinating because I think there may be more of us out here that don't even realize that the sensory issue or sensitivity is actually a thing instead of it's just us in our heads making ourselves crazy. Because that's literally what I thought before I got on the call here with you today.
And one of my favorite things to say to women that I talk to who start realizing that this is true for them is, you're not crazy, you're not broken, you're not weird, and there are a lot of us out there. So I'm going to backtrack for a second. Elaine Aron is a psychologist who came out with a book called The Highly Sensitive Person in the late 1990s. She was the first person to really study this trait. So many of us grew up being told, you're too sensitive. And Archita, going back to what you were talking about in your early work experience with the feedback, it could be sensitive in a lot of different ways. A lot of us have trouble receiving feedback and even giving feedback if you're in a manager role and you are empathizing with the people on your team. But there were so many of us that were told, you need to grow a thicker skin. You can't be so sensitive. The world doesn't work like that. You can't have it your way. Deal with it. And the messages that we got over and over and over again were, you are broken, you need to be fixed, and suck it up. And it's the reason that I don't really talk about high sensitivity or use the highly sensitive person terminology that Elaine Aron used, because especially I work with women leaders, both in the workplace and entrepreneurs, both workplaces, but both in corporate and entrepreneurs. And women leaders have so many challenges already that they're facing so many different things that other leaders aren't necessarily. The last thing they need is to have a label attached to them that has some sort of stigma that might make them seem or feel like they're weaker than others. It was interesting because I did a really informal Facebook poll on not my business page, but my personal page. And I don't accept, the only contacts on my personal page are people that I know. And I said, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the term highly sensitive in terms of a person? And it was fascinating. I got difficult to work with. I got, you have to tread carefully because you don't want to offend them. I got somewhere on the spectrum. I got just a number of things. Now, it wasn't all negative. There were definitely some people who had very positive things to say. But this is why I started using the term perceptive, because women that have these, a disclaimer, it's not just women. The genders are pretty balanced in terms of who has this trait. But I work with women and I've had a lot more conversations with women who have the trait. So part of the trait itself is we are taking in more information from processing, more data and more stimuli, a lot more than brains that aren't as highly sensitive. And so we are noticing more. We're noticing nuances. You might see color differences more clearly than other people. Little things that other people don't notice, just details in your environment. You probably notice changes. If somebody gets a haircut or their clothing, we were talking about the amazing color blue that you're wearing, Olivia, don't realize that they actually have this trait because, as I said at the beginning, it's just been so stigmatized and so misunderstood. And a lot of people don't really see the superpowers of it, but there are a lot of them.
Gosh, it's so true about stigmatization. But what is crazy is the fact that you're right, we're labeled already, like an inordinate amount of labels as women. Just navigating the workplace as only is navigating the workplace. And I think I said this right at the start. It's such a trigger word, hearing sensitive. So I love that you have almost reframed it in a safe way for folks to start exploring it through the usage of the word perceptive, being more perceptive, because that just seems, I'm empowered to now handle this, versus sensitive that the world has told us growing up since we were tiny. Like, I know Olivia can resonate with this. I resonate with this, is that buckle up, be better, toughen up, do more, cry less, like whatever the heck it is, right? So you mentioned something, and I don't know if it was on another podcast, but you spoke about extreme self-expectations. And I noticed this with like high-achieving women, and I'm going to raise my hand up and say, yes, I'm high-achieving. Like, I put this extreme self-expectation to control my environment. Like, for instance, Rachel, like for anyone watching the video, like Rachel has this door behind you right now. It's driving me crazy right now. Not in a bad way, but I'm just like, I could not have that door open. Like, I need the door closed. Like, it is it's literally giving me so much anxiety. I can't explain it. So I constantly control my environment since the time we've had it open, like since the beginning of this call. Before I met my therapist, I had my day planned out to the last hour to control like what I focus on, because I'm in like 80 different things, but to make sure I'm giving everything my time in a way in which that makes the most sense. And so she challenged me to not put so many expectations on myself, because that in itself is extremely exhausting. So how do you have people like navigate this extreme self-expectation as they start discovering or start being more attentive to wherever they lie on their level of perceptiveness in their journey?
First of all, I have to apologize that my door is causing.
I'm letting it go. I'm letting it go. Literally, I was like, oh my God, how can she focus? How is she doing this? I need to know the secret. Like I was asking myself all these questions.
The short answer is there's nobody in the apartment, so nothing can happen to distract me from outside the door. And there's a bunch of stuff hanging on the other side of the door that would really distract you. So great question, though, about the extreme high expectations, both for ourselves and for others, typically, but more for ourselves, I think, because we are processing so much, because we download so much information, because we notice all the details, because we tend to be good at both the big picture and the details at the same time, because we tend to have some issues with boundaries. One of the things that I learned when I started deep diving into the research around the highly sensitive brain is so this is a neurological, physiological outcome that's been shown in studies of the brain. We tend to optimize for successful group outcomes, not individual outcomes.
Damn. Hold on. Just please repeat that. I'm like literally like, no kidding.
Like I almost want us to flip this section and share it to Instagram, because if that wasn't a mic drop, I don't know. Rachel, I need you to repeat that 2 more times.
Oh my gosh.
Brain research has shown that the brains of highly sensitive people optimize for successful group outcomes rather than individual outcomes. And imagine when you've got a strong woman leader who has all her life been socialized to do things for other people, to take care of other people. So this is another trait that is very closely associated with this. All the women I work with, we tend to A, give 150%, and B, give it to everyone and everything but ourselves.
I feel like Rachel's like reading us like up and down right now. She's been on this call for 10 seconds and I'm like, why are you attacking me? Stop it.
Why are you in my mind, Rachel?
One of the reasons I love my work so much is because so many women like you, like me, have just felt this pressure on us our entire lives, whether it's from our families, our cultures, our societies. And again, it goes back to the I'm weird, I'm broken, I'm crazy, because everybody else seems to be able to handle it. And somehow I'm the one who feels more pressure, more struggle. Why is it just me? It's not just you. There are so many of us out there. And one of the joys of my work is bringing some of these women together in community to be able to hear each other's stories and be able to talk with each other and share both the challenges and the wins, because there is somebody else who gets you. You're not alone. And so many of us feel like we're alone, especially when we're women leaders in the workplace, right? You're among a leadership team or an executive team that has very few other women. Some of the women are looking at, the role models that they've seen from years and years of different kinds of leadership and are not being their authentic selves. And so they're putting on a persona, they're masking, they're coming across a certain way. So we have a choice. We can either try to do that too, or we can try to be our authentic selves, which can be really hard when you've got these sensitivities and when you are wired for successful group outcomes and not the individual outcomes.
Rachel, I want to dig in with you here because you're saying so many things that I'm sure Archita and I, the light bulbs lighting up in our heads. But you said a couple things that I want to dig into for just a second. The first is being wired for group success versus individual success. I would argue to say I'm not a member of the majority, obviously, but from an intersection being an immigrant Black woman, from the minute you can understand words, you are literally told, right? It's your responsibility to take care of everything. There is no fail. No one is coming to save you. You have to figure this out yourself. So there's some of that wrapped into maybe a little bit of the migrant story or the immigrant story. When you get here, it's you're not given the space to just be yourself, right? It's no one wants to hear, I'm just being my authentic self. They're like, be whatever the heck you need to be to get this done. Okay. Because we need to survive and we need to pay bills. So there's no language where it's okay to just like live and be. It's like, we have bills to pay. You got to figure this out. You have to get good grades because there's no college fund. You have to go to the best school. You have to do all these things because you're already starting behind. So you have that. And then fast forward, these same women enter the workforce now. And a lot of us, like Archita and I, were engineers. We started off our careers as engineers. So you're an only in these male-dominated spaces that I didn't mind because I grew up with brothers, but you're in these male-dominated spaces. And you have to adopt, we think we have to adopt these personas to survive in that kind of environment. So you're further getting lost in the shuffle here. So any sensitivity that you might have, and I'll just use myself as an example, being in the Coast Guard, like no one wanted to hear that I was triggered by noises or that I couldn't deal with the fumes. There was no time nor space for any of that. So how do you, that is deep social engineering, right? It is deep-seated social engineering coming from a well-intended family level to sometimes well-intended, sometimes not well-intended career, right? And then it lands you here. So how do you suggest women that may be listening to this and having some aha moments like we are, how do you even begin the work?
So first I want to say, I would love to hear your Coast Guard stories. That must be amazing. I hear you. And I think that question of how do you begin the work is one of the reasons that a lot of women don't, because it sounds so intimidating, because everything you described, it's so deep seated. It's so ingrained. Peeling back the layers, there are so many layers, right? I'm still peeling back my own layers and I'm not sure when I'm going to get to the core. I'm not sure where it is or how many more layers there are. The very first thing I would say is get support. It is really hard to do it yourself. But there are so many others of us here who hear you and see you and have been there and are still there and understand what it is that you're dealing with. Find either a person, it could be a coach, it could be a therapist, find someone who can support you. A lot of it, and we were talking about this before in Archita's example of talking with her therapist, a lot of it is to be gentle with yourself. The high expectations are really, really hard to tear down. They're ingrained as well, right? The perfectionism, the lack of boundaries, the inability to say no. So many of us struggle with those things. Self-care is the key to all of it. And when I say self-care, I don't mean, getting a massage or taking a vacation, although those are taking care of our families and our pets and we're commuting and get the sleep you need and do everything that you can to create conditions for high quality sleep, because a lot of us have trouble sleeping. So it may take us longer to fall asleep. Turn off your phones, turn off your computers, turn off your everything an hour or two before you go to bed. Look at some of the things that you're consuming before bed and maybe move that to a few hours earlier, food and drinks and things like that. Sleep is imperative. I could go on and on about this, I'm sure you could tell, but really listen to your body and your soul and what it is telling you that you need and do those things. I had to go the hard way when I was a director at a Fortune 500 in 2014. I burned myself out so badly. And it wasn't just from that job. It was, gradually leading up to that job. I burned myself out so badly that I became somebody I didn't really recognize. And I ended up literally having to quit my job, sell my home, and move to rural Peru to find the time and space that I needed to start recovering. And that recovery journey took me years. And sadly, it wasn't the first or the last time that I burned myself out. It was the most severe. I'm happy to say I've never done it again like that. But I want to help other women not ever get to that point. And one of the things that you need to do is give yourself some grace and take care of yourself.
I feel like I'm just going to sign up for your circle now, because everything that you're talking about, I feel like Archita and I talk about on our side chats or in WhatsApp. And the burnout is real. And I think even for women like us that talk to thousands of women and coach women, and you still sometimes fall into these behavioral traps. To be vulnerable, I'm in one right now. Like I'm in a new space. I want to do well. I'm trying to figure it out. You burn the candles at both ends. You're like, oh, I'll sacrifice an hour or two of sleep. It'll be fine. I'll catch up later. You never catch up. And I think there's certainly Archita's question about those absurdly high expectations that we set for ourselves. I really am starting to feel like that is the crux of it's self-inflicted, right? It's certainly self-inflicted, but our environment has a lot to do with it. But at the end of the day, it's our behavior that needs to change, right? It's us. And we need to listen to our bodies. So I think that feedback is so great.
I want to talk about that a little bit, about the listening to our body. I went down a rabbit hole. I have 4 pages of notes on listening to my body, actually. So as I said, the universe gives you what your body desires. You just need to start paying attention to it, right? And that's the main kind of journey I've gone on. I was talking to some women. I'm part of one of the million groups I'm a part of, Olivia. And so on the WhatsApp chat, this woman posts something on LinkedIn and she talks about deconditioning. So up until the age of, and this is a little spiritual, okay? So for whoever follows it or not, bless you, don't bless you, whatever it is. Don't listen, don't listen, tune it out, doesn't matter. But this was interesting. So according to this kind of school of thought, we are listening to our bodies up until the age of, I think it's 7 or 8. We're truly listening to our bodies up until that period of time, 7 or 8 years old. From 8 years old, the world around us starts conditioning us on how we need to behave, show up, and engage with the world. And then we spend, most people, their entire lives never having truly listened to their body. It's called my body graph. I don't know if you're familiar with this work. Okay, it's called the human design. Oh my God, I literally went down this total path. It's interesting.
You're going to put me in a rabbit hole too, Archita.
I know. I'm going to send you the link. But it's called human design, and it's interesting. The guy's a marketer, so I'm just like, okay. But he that designed this. It's based in this philosophy of the Hinduism, astrology, a Chinese zodiac, a couple of other spiritual schools of thought. But what's really fascinating is that you can do this assessment. Anybody can do this. It's free, and it tells you what kind of people are out there in the world. And as I was reading my assessment, I'm a generator. Okay. And that means I'm generating, but I'm a manifesting generator, which means that I want to act, I want to do things, etc. I sometimes over the manifesting part of me, I'm not totally, this is like Strengths Finder, Olivia. We both are very much into the Strengths Finder Kool-Aid as well. But this manifesting generator also wants to initiate action. But that depletes my energy when I constantly want to initiate action. But since I'm a generator and this manifesting generator, it drives it. I don't know if anyone, maybe they have, and Rachel, you could tell me, they've done some correlation between neurodivergence and all of this. But one of the journeys I'm going on is that they talk about listening to the sacral center, which we have lost conditioning of, right, over all these years. And that's like the inner truth. And my strategy, which it's so freaking simple, right? It is wait to respond. It's my biggest gift as an activator, my biggest gift as everything, which I have known for the longest time, but I've never listened to it. We all lose sight of listening to what our bodies tell us, because in the moment, we want to give, like what you said earlier, Rachel, about wanting to optimize for group outcomes constantly. So constantly want to give. I can't think of a single one-on-one I have had with peers who are fractionals, individuals who probably will never work with me, but have given 8,000% in that call. I cannot think of a single call. And that is exhausting. So I'm going to stop my little soapbox, but I would say that I think one of the biggest gifts we can give ourselves is to start listening to ourselves and start the journey, whichever direction it might go in, like therapist, coach, doing your own research online, etc. But what a beautiful thing, be able to start truly listening to whatever we want to call it, like our intuition, our sacral center, or whatever it is, to truly help guide us and then be led by it.
You're spot on, Archita. And yeah, I'm resisting the urge to pile on here because I want to ask Rachel another question. I read this book, Rachel. You can tell me if it's BS or not, because I don't know. But it's called The Untethered Soul. Have you read that one?
I'm not familiar with that one.
Okay, I can't remember who. It's somewhere around here because I keep it pretty handy. But it tells you to think about your body as almost like an avatar. And like you're this spirit sitting inside the avatar. And you're supposed to be directing your body. But what happens is we have forgotten that we can drive the body and listen to the body and communicate with the body. And so we've forgotten over time, similar to what Archita is saying. And so we get misaligned, our head or our spirit from our body. And I'll fast forward the story, highly recommend the book. It was very fascinating to go through. Again, I don't know if it's facts or if it's BS. So you guys, if you read it and you find out it's BS, don't judge me. I just found the concept fascinating. But I've taken a little snippet out of the book and literally in the shower, you guys, I ask my body what it needs from me. I'm like, are you tight? I like literally pay attention to how my toes feel, my ankles feel, my back feels, my neck feels, because I carry my stress here. I'm like, how are you feeling? What do you need? Do you need food? Do you need water? Do you need yoga? Do you need something from me? And since I started to do that, Rachel, there's something so spot on with what you're telling people. Since I started to take that moment of mindfulness, it's literally just in the shower. We're not talking about an excessive activity here. Of listening and feeding my body what it needs, the return on investment for that little bit of time has been remarkable. Like I actually feel myself spiraling, right? Like when the anxiety is getting too high and the burnout's starting to come, I feel it coming and I can take steps to prevent it before I'm trying to throw myself in the canal. I can take steps to prevent it, but it really is learning. And oh my God, like I'm in my 40s at this point, and I just learned this.
The pause is the most important thing we can do. So you mentioned mindfulness. It really is all about mindfulness. Some people hear that and they think, God, I'm a busy executive. I don't have time for that shit, right? It's not about sitting and meditating for an hour. It's not about shutting all thoughts out of your mind. It doesn't have to be anything like that. That's not possible to do. It is doing exactly the practice that you were talking about in the shower, saying, what do I need? The number of times where I have been sitting at my computer at 10 o'clock at night trying to finish something, ignoring the fact that I'm exhausted, I haven't eaten dinner, I may have to go to the bathroom. I'm just like, no, I have to finish this thing. Why do we do that? So we're programmed to do that, and our brains are not helping. So giving ourselves a pause, giving ourselves a moment to ask, exactly as you've been talking about, Olivia, what is it that I need now? Oh, you know what? I've been yawning for the past half an hour. Maybe I need to take a break. Or I haven't gotten out of this chair for 3 hours. Maybe I need to take a quick walk around the block. Or, my water glass has been sitting empty next to me, all day. Why don't I go refill my water glass? First of all, we're listening to ourselves and we're giving ourselves what we need. That pause can also allow more in. So if we're stuck on something, I know this is the process of writing the book. I've had to do this a lot. Sometimes we just get to the point where we can't, nothing's downloading, nothing's flowing, and giving ourselves that pause or the walk or whatever else it is that we need can open the floodgates again and redirect and help us figure out what the best next step actually is.
Much value. I really want to kind of read that is the power of the pause, right? There's just so much significance in the power of the pause. But what's really interesting, Rachel, is one of the things I hear a lot from the women I work with, which is women getting out of corporate and making that transition out, is this pressure where they feel like they need to be more likable. And you talk about this, right? So they're just like, well, I need to show up this way. And this kind of leads to that self-expectation, and where that likability and authenticity almost seem in like dissonance with each other, where it feels so risky to let this go, likability, to be able to be authentic, because they've got to show up a certain way and they've been conditioned to do that for a while. how might they be able to like navigate this while it feels scary and thrive, knowing that yes, it feels scary, but they've got to reconcile those fears essentially?
So there are a few different things that come to mind when I hear your question. One of them is look at leaders that you respect. Look at people whom you like and think about why it is that you like and respect them. What are the qualities that they present? This is one of the things I talk about a lot with clients when it comes to things like boundaries and saying no. If you are just trying to be liked and you're saying yes to something, you've got a million projects on your plate and only 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day to actually get those done. Telling somebody, oh yeah, I think I can do that. Is that kind? It's not kind to yourself, for one thing. And if you are then struggling to get everything else done or to juggle and you know you're not going to be able to do as good a job because you're overcommitted, it's not kind to them either. You're not doing the best thing in that case for anyone involved. So would you rather be seen as the person who does an amazing job on the things that they commit to because they know they can commit and give themselves to those things? Or would you rather be the person who says yes to everything? And if you just think about it that way, I mean, do you respect the person who says yes to everything? Because I don't. I'm thinking about a leader who was a director in a corporate environment where I used to work. And he was very clear. His goal was to become a vice president. He took on every task that nobody else wanted to do. And it's unusual in this case because a lot of the time men won't do this. A lot of the time it's women who do this. He took on everything because he wanted to be agreeable and he wanted to help move the team forward. I mean, it wasn't about ego, but I kept saying, they are not going to respect you for taking on the tasks that nobody else wants to do. That is not how you are going to move forward. So when you think about likability, I would say, ask yourself, what is it that you really want? Do you want a lot of people who are kind of friendly because you're likable? Do you want people who actually see you and hear you and get you and know who you really are and appreciate that person and all of the strengths that person has and the challenges? Because we all have both of them. It's always two sides of the coin, right? So that's one of the things that helps me.
I think it's a great way to reframe that. What would you rather be viewed as? I think, and I think sometimes our folks that very much want to be agreeable, sometimes I find it to be a trauma response because they just don't want the rejection that they faced perhaps in the past. But I think it's a great question to be like, is this how you want to be seen, or is this how you want to be? And the follow-up question to that is this behavior going to help you accomplish your mission or not? Because sometimes it feels good because maybe what's preventing us from feeling that pain that trauma has taught us comes with rejection. But now you're sacrificing short-term pleasantries for your long-term mission. So I think those two questions are just brilliant, Rachel. Okay, so we're coming up on time here, and I have one more question for you before we talk about the book and how people can get a hold of you. People like myself that are like, where's Rachel been my entire life? So if you have one piece of advice for women who are exhausted and burnt out from constantly giving that 110%, especially for those women still in corporate, of course, Archita is helping women pivot out, and I'm trying to help people work the system within, especially for the women that still want long careers in corporate. What would that advice be?
I think that there are a couple of pieces to it. One would be, going back to the question that you just asked, who do you want to be? How do you want to show up in the world? And working backwards from that, as you were saying in this particular context we were talking about. One of the things that I hear from so many of the women I work with is, I want to be the best leader I can be. And when I ask them about that, it's not about them. It's not about ego. It's not about promotions. It's not about status. When I ask them why, it is almost always for my team, for my company, for the people who support me and my mission, for all of the people I've been working really hard with. I want to see them succeed. You can't do that if you're not taking care of yourself. If you're burning out, if you are working 12 hours a day and commuting crazy distances and hours, if you are not setting boundaries and not learning how to say no to certain things, you cannot ever be the best leader that you can be. So that's what I would.
Hear, hear.
Gosh.
Hear, hear. I feel like you're like the fourth or fifth guest that has said the same thing. Okay, perfect. Rachel, we appreciate you so much. So as always, we like to amplify our guests. So obviously your research is amazing. I can't wait for the book to drop. I'll be first in line to grab that. Other than first, tell us when the book is dropping. And then secondly, if we have folks that would love to work with you, how can they find you?
So I would love to. One disclaimer, the research isn't mine. It is other people's research that I have been reading and gathering and studying. And I'm not a researcher, but I do help gather that information and communicate it and share it. I am on LinkedIn. There are very few Rachel Radways in the world. I am very fortunate in that. So find me on LinkedIn. RERcoaching.com is my website. You can find me there. And the book is coming out next summer. I wish it could be a little sooner than that, but there are ways to sign up to get on the mailing list so that you can contribute to and be part of the book journey before it comes out. There is a sign up on my website for that. So I would love for people to come and join the journey with me and be ready when it comes out.
Absolutely amazing. So to recap the lessons here, folks, 1, give yourself grace. 2, you're not alone. There's apparently a lot of us out here that didn't even know that we were us, but we're out here. Find yourself a tribe. You've heard this before, but especially if you resonate with what Rachel is saying, find yourself a support system. And lastly, the self-care. Listen to your bodies. Don't just go get a massage, even though those are lovely and I love them too. Really start listening to your body and taking care of yourself. So with that, we are coming to a close. Another phenomenal episode here. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us. And for all of our listeners, as always, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Till next time.
Thank you both. It's an absolute pleasure to talk with you.